Yeah, the Virtual REI Academy, we're very proud of it. We're so honored to be working with Nicole and James with this endeavor. There are people on there that's teaching the courses that, like I was talking about before, they're practitioners. They're actually investing and doing the job and putting together creative deals. And we're constantly adding more classes. So, it's great. I wish we had something like this when Jane and I were starting out. There's a lot of content, a lot of forms, a lot of classes in there. And, like we're always evolving, always learning new techniques, always adding classes to there, bringing more instructors on board. So it's a great program to check out.
And I think one of the cool things that we now get to do is with working with James and Nicole on multifamily that and Virtual REI Academy, because we meet so many different people that, sometimes, people are just in the shadows, and tonight is kind of one of those folks who does a lot. He's an expert in his field. He's probably one of the best in the country, but sometimes you don't hear about people because they're so busy out there actually doing stuff, and they're just not in the classroom saying, oh, look at me, look what I do. So tonight we're bringing Ernie on, and Ernie's going to talk about some rehab stuff. And we met Ernie about 2 years ago, I think. So just, very humble, and he's done a lot. I think he bought his first property at probably age 22. He did some house hacking, moved to Charlotte. Not only does he have his GC license, he has his real estate license, so he's got a lot of tools on his belt, and he wants to share some stuff with us about rehabbing and getting your numbers right to make sure that you're maximizing your profits. And we're blessed to have Ernie in our life, and I'm glad he's here and can teach everybody a thing or two about rehabs. And we're gonna sit back and take notes ourselves.
Well, thank you for the introduction, and those that don't know me in the group, I'm Ernie Smith, and I'll get into that here in just a little bit. But to James and Nicole, I'm newer to this group with the connections with them, so I always enjoy the multifamily space because, again, when you do real estate in the single family space, you just inevitably end up starting to grow. You got to figure out where to put your money at, right? So you either buy more properties or go buy a property with more doors, which I tend to like the idea of more. So, but off of, and let me see, let me get to share this thing here. Let's see if I get it. I got like 4 screens, so I got to figure out where everything's at on this thing. So, see, it says host disabled.
So can we make him host, or do you have to, James?
James, you're muted.
You're muted.
I could understand why you guys could share, but he couldn't because I thought I turned it. So you should be able to share now, Ernie.
All right, let's give it a whirl. Here we go. All right,
you got it
on there.
Yes.
Now I just got to figure out where I got to look at. All right, so kind of what we're getting into is the price is wrong. And so when we look at a rehab, or really even in multifamily spaces, you guys do this stuff, is taking the big elephant in the room, the big project, and really breaking it down into the small increments or the smaller projects, and really coming up with a number that goes along with it that you can eventually put into your budget. And then that's layered with how many rooms, how many bathrooms, how many kitchens you're doing, kind of in all this. So I put it in here, the price is wrong, to kind of play off a little bit of the Price is Right, right? Good old Bob Barker. But the Price is Wrong is really just kind of the step-by-step process on how to estimate and budget your projects properly. And so just a little bit about who I am. I am Ernie Smith. And as you see, I am related to Bert. That is my mother. So I get that question asked a lot, so I'll just go ahead and throw that out there first. I originally went to school for draft design and engineering, so a little bit of a left brain, but still have a lot of right brain in there. I started house hacking when I bought my first property when I moved to Charlotte when I was 23. This is before house hacking became house hacking, I guess. So I started doing the fix and flips. And I think within the first 5 years of Charlotte, I moved like 12 times. So I got really efficient in moving. As Jane and Sharon have mentioned that I now am a licensed general contractor, and I'll get into that a little bit, as well as a licensed real estate agent. I did that in 2014 and 2018. And kind of along with that, I watch a lot of HGTV, just like many of you all do. And so I become a little bit of a self-design and essentially build the projects, build the budgets for the projects. And that's kind of what we're going to dive into a little bit tonight. So on this, kind of developed like a 4-step process to estimating. Estimating is one of those things, it's not really the sexy side of real estate, right? Because it's numbers. But ultimately, that's where you kind of dive down into what is your maximum allowable offer for single family houses, or it's a built-in process. You can guess, or you can actually have a really working knowledge of what those numbers are, so you can be very specific and kind of plan for the oopses and the mishaps that happen along the way. So in the 4-step process, we have define the scope, which clearly outlines the objectives, the deliverables, and the requirements of the project. Estimate resources. So this is identifying and quantifying the resources needed for each task or the work package. Include personnel, materials, equipment, other required resources. And get into determine duration. That's the timing. That's everything's around time. So what does a project look like? How long is it going to take? What's the follow-up projects behind it that's piggybacked off of that? We'll get into kind of the tasks a little bit. And obviously all these things are layered. So this is only held to 30 minutes. So we're going to stay to it. And then lastly is calculate the cost that goes along with that and break it down each of those components. And feel free along the way that if we get to a part that you got some questions, go ahead and ask, but I will try to leave some time at the end for some questions and answers. Everybody good? Perfect. All right, so start with the end in mind. This is one of those areas that when you think about life, you don't want to think about the end, but this is a project, so you always want to think about the end and work your way backwards. So define the scope. We'll go with the step 4, like we had here. Define the scope, clearly outline the objectives, right? So you want to take a look at your project and get what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like, the appropriate selections. Are you doing it for a rental? Are you doing it for a retail? Totally different types of materials are you going to put in, different types of costs that's going to go associated with it with the labor. Break the project down into smaller projects and their smaller pieces. And then what are these pieces needed to complete your project? So always start with the end in mind. So when you look at this house, you're like, man, this is a massive house. Where do you start, right? And that's kind of where you have to start with that plan. And when you're doing a rehab, you may already have this house, right? Then the objective is like, what are we doing to it? Like, what are we going to improve? We're going to go into this, maybe a class C or class B neighborhood. Chances are you're not going to see this house there, but you might get into a class B or A, and you're going to find the lower end on this. And then, okay, what are we going to do to maximize the profitability out of this property? So where do you start? So I always kind of look at it in construction. You always start from the very beginning, or you start by room to room, and when you're breaking this thing down for doing a rehab. But we're gonna kind of step in, because all of this comes with a plan. So as Benjamin Franklin says, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? So again, it's taking the house design and breaking it into smaller pieces and then following the step-by-step process to complete. So for instance, this is just a simple design. And when you look at this, this is kind of like the new barn dominiums, if you will. Or shipping containers, you can kind of go in the same way. But this is a very simple design, very just rectangular shape, nothing super crazy about it. From the design standpoint, it's easy, right? So when you look at this, this is getting into just the design, what it's going to look like on the outside, and then what it's laid out to on the inside. So now we have these really these 8 locations. You have the living room, bedroom 1, 2, and 3. Then you got the hall bathroom, the master bathroom, the utility room, kitchen, and dining room, right? So again, kind of going back to what we mentioned at first, you break it down room by room, right? Room by room. So what does it look like? What does it feel like? You know, what's the overall design that you want to do with that so it's cohesive throughout? And when you look at the rooms and designing, now you have to start breaking them down into the next phase. So this is going to be a 2-dimensional layout of what you would start with, and that's kind of what we're looking at here. And then you're going to break it into visually looking at it in a different light. And that's kind of when you start getting into that 3-dimensional. Doing the design side of it, when I was in school, we did all this stuff on the drafting design table, right? So this is literally drawing by pencil. And this is before CAD came out. So I'm dating myself a little bit, but there's a practice that went along with it, and drawing itself was an art by itself. But now with the 3D rendering, you can visually have the 2D, and it lays out all the elevations and everything goes into it. And then you can come out with this 3-dimensional, where now you can actually pan through and walk through the whole entire house. And you can kind of look at and already establish what some oops are, or maybe you have to relocate a couple things, or maybe the dimensions are off a little bit, or when you get furniture in there, it doesn't really have that good a placement, right? So it really helps you to kind of pick out some of those issues that come out. So a couple things here. I'm just going to pull it back some. When you are doing a rehab, are you going to go through all this? No. If you're going to do like an addition to that rehab, then yeah, you'll go through this phase a little bit with the design. But ultimately, I just kind of want to take you through it as you would if this is like a brand new build. And because ultimately, when you're doing a brand new build, there's about like 278 steps. Well, we're talking 4, going through it today. So this is just kind of on a very, very small scale. But I wanted to the idea of this is I want to show you kind of where you start and then work your way through the process and understand it. So this is just a little bit of the education, because you're dealing with the subcontractors and other people like myself that do general contracting. And it's kind of like, I kind of relate it. You are taking your car to the mechanic. You have this thumping noise in the car, and that's the only way you can express it to the mechanic. And the mechanic's like, man, I just made another $400 or $500 off of this guy, right? So, but now if I went in there and say, oh, hey, it's making this ticking noise, it's coming from the engine, it seems like it's doing it, like it's a missing. Now they kind of, okay, he knows a little bit about it, so now it's a little bit more specific. So this is more of just to educate you on what really goes into the house, if you will. So this is the basic floor plan that you'll get from a designer. It'll have your elevation, so you'll be able to see it in kind of that 2-dimensional standard. And then when you do the 3-dimensional like this, you will see it actually in the model dimension, and you can walk through it and see it, feel it, put different textures on it, and really get a good idea of what it's going to look like. Because then you're going to start going through the process on each of the plans, there's going to be your M&Ps, your mechanical, your electrical, your plumbing. So these are also different layers or pages in the blueprints. So this one that's here is the electrical plan. So you just, for instance, like you'll see in the master bath, the master bedroom, there'll be an S, and then there's a light, the line that goes to the light or the fan. So that's just the switch for the room. So the question that would be, are you doing a one-phase switch? Are you doing a two-phase switch? Because is your ceiling fan with the remote control, or is it got something else to it? And so you're going to get into that aspect of it. And then subsequently, you'll have one for the plumbing, and you'll have one for the heating and air conditioning system. And all of that is just another layers that's in that blueprint. And each of those goes to those trades. But when you look at it from the owner's standpoint, this is just giving you information. You're giving the same information to them. They're going to come in and give you quotes, and you're going to go out and get like 3 or 4 quotes from all these different subcontractors, and they're going to be all over the board, right? And so the part of the estimating is really kind of just getting a gauge for what is a true cost, and really to help minimize the differences. And then as well as just really kind of manage your budgets and all of this, which is really what it comes down to, and your profitability. So, and then when you're doing the rehab, like for instance, like a house that we're doing right now, the HVAC system was already in place. We converted a garage into a master suite. So we had a master bedroom. I guess I shouldn't call it a master anymore because we've changed it, right? So it's the owner suite. And then there's the owner's, the master bath, and then the master closet. Of course I have it. You'll just have to bear with me tonight on this. So we had 3 other sources that came in out of that existing unit. Well, the unit was large enough to accommodate the additional square footage. So we were able just to go in and essentially adapt the system and then create 3 new legs off of that, versus having to go out and buy a whole brand new system and everything. So that in alone was about a $12,000 savings, where it only cost us maybe $1,200 in ductwork, because we knew enough about what we had that it worked out to where now we don't have to go spend 12 grand on a brand new system. Does that make sense? Yes, everybody, I got volume anywhere? Okay, I got thumbs up. Perfect. I like it. I mean, I like to hear myself talk, but I just want to make sure you guys are all good. So the big part is just knowing your materials and understanding the scope of work, right? And this is the estimate resources. So you're going to figure out, if you're getting into new construction, you're going to already have establishes with these building networks. So you're going to get in with like maybe a company like 84 Lumber that you can go in and buy lumber at bulk. You might get in with like a building source place that you're going to go in there and buy all your framing package and all your materials for that. Your roof sheathing, your wall sheathing, everything that goes around encompassing the outside of the house. Your electrical, we call M&Ps, which are mechanical, your electrical, your plumbing. Those are 3 of the major components. Roof being the 4th, windows being the 5th. And those are your major expenses in any of the properties. And then subsequently, even a multifamily space will be your largest cost. But understanding those are your largest cost, when you're looking at buying a single family house or a duplex, I'll give you, for instance, like I bought a duplex actually in Pennsylvania. And this particular property, when we looked at it, it was pitched to us as a duplex. And then when we went to go see the property, found out that it had 1 heating and air conditioning system, it had 1 plumbing throughout meter, and had 1 electrical meter. So that already, just by the HVAC itself, you had one person controlling the thermostat for both the upstairs unit and downstairs unit. Well, that's not going to work. So the highest and best use for that property for us was converting it back to a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. So that one is actually one that we have work in progress right now. But you can see on here, some of the other ones are like your interior doors, your exterior doors. Do you have a source for those? By having these sources is giving you the ability to save money as well. Versus kind of going to a place like a box store, like a Lowe's, Home Depot, Menards, or something like that, right? Because you're going to be paying retail pricing at that point. So those are other parts. This is the third one in the segment of 4 is the determination of duration of time. Time is your friend and time is your enemy. And really a lot of this stuff goes into like the subcontractors. Oh yeah, I can really come in and do this job. It's going to take me 4 days to do it. Okay, fantastic. So I have to hold you accountable to that 4 days. But I tell them now, for me, because I've learned over the time, it's like, okay, well, you say 4 days, you're confident with that. I'm going to give you a 5th day extra. And then after the 5th day, I'm going to start deducting you X amount of dollars per day because you tell me it's going to be 4 days. So I'm going to hold your feet to the fire. I didn't do that before. So because I didn't do that before, my time started slipping. So those M&P trades, if they ran, instead of 4 days, they ran 7 days or 8 days, I had other trades that were piggybacking off of them that they need to get done with their stuff first before the other ones can get started. So next thing you know, they finally finish. The other one now is on some other job. So they're pulled away from your project, and then you can't get them for another 2 or 3 weeks. So now you're just kind of in this downward spiral because your schedule's off. And we'll touch base a little bit on that here in just a second. So time is is your friend and is not your friend. And it really just depends on what you do with managing those contractors and your time with your knowledge. So as you can see, we're gonna kind of explore the next layer, if you will. So we're gonna raise the roof on this one. So this is a roof design out of your blueprints plan. You're gonna look at it and it's gonna be some people are gonna look at it and be like, I don't understand any of this. And what this is essentially kind of a four side gable roof, and then you have your hip roof off the side of this, and the points come into it. I'm like drawing in space here. I feel like I need to have my whiteboard up. But so you're really looking down on the top of the roof on this part here. And so what you're doing is you're learning the slope. You're learning how many valleys and pitches there are, the ridge vent. And these are things that you're going to see in the next slide with it. But so this is kind of the parts of the roof, and this is a picture I pulled offline, and that's, of LF Design in the Bay Area. So if you know them, give them a shout out for me. But this is kind of a good orientation picture when you look at some of the names of the roof. And again, my whole part of this is just to kind of get you familiar with some of the that terminology, because again, going back to the mechanic, I got a thud going where I have something specific like a timing issue. It's just knowing a little bit, gaining some knowledge about it. So gable vents, if you look at their the type of roof, whether it be maybe asphalt shingles, or maybe you're doing some metal standing seam roof like we did on the barndominium. All of those are going to have some different cost values that go along with it. Also, there's going to be some years that goes into it. Like if you do a 3-tab shingle asphalt, it's got a 15-year life. And oops, not the slide I thought, but it's got a 15-year life. And then you go to a 30-year architectural shingle, and then you get into like the metal roofs, which is a 50-year. And then you get into they got a bunch of synthetic products and stuff that are out now that also are like a 50-year. But every time you look at those, there's a different cost, a different cost, a different cost. So you have to really understand the property that I'm buying. Is it for a rental, or is it for retail? That's the biggest bubble that you have to understand first. And then you start working your way down, like understanding what that final product looks like and working your way backwards. So this next slide, you're going to be like, all right, well, how does a CEO, CMO, COO, they're all the same. You know, whether I'm looking at, you know, my wallet or my phone, you know, they're all in that same part, right? So you have a product, you have a house, you have a company, they all have these additional bubbles, and you know, you have to break them all down into what each does. And that's kind of what I'm doing here with the roof. We have the roof, we have the framing side, then we have material selections, and then you start picking out all the components that go into it, and then eventually you end up having that budget for that particular item, right? So that's one light item, that's the one cost. Now you put that over there, you dog ear X amount of dollars for it, and you move on. I know that we're at 7:56, so I want to go through a couple of these. I wasn't quite sure how much time I was going to have, but so if I'm running long, just give me a heads up and we can go there. So this is just kind of a quick flow through, start to finish. So design, having that idea in mind, working through to your CapEx, your capital expenditures, which is going to be your M&Ps, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, windows, and roof. You're going to go into the next sector, which is your rooms. You're going to start breaking down, you know, what's affected in each of the room, what needs to be addressed, what needs to be selected. Do we need paint colors? Do we need, you know, trim? All these different things. The finishes, you know, you got the low end to high end. Again, rental or retail is going to dictate what your finishing types are. And this in itself, I mean, you could blow any budget, you know, horrendously. So if you know that you're going to go into the retail, you know, like that first house that I showed you, you know, that house is like, maybe it's worth 1 million at the end of it, and you're buying it for 600,000, you're putting $150,000 into it. And so you're at 750, and you want to make that, you know, essentially that 20% spread in there, 25% spread. You know, it's understanding what am I spending that $150,000 on, right? So you want to be very specific. And lastly is labor. And so I always kind of joke and say that that's the 5-letter uncontrollable, because again, it's like herding cats. You know, sorry, James, I know that you're allergic to cats, but this is kind of like that. So when you're managing these subs, again, the more that you're able to have those upfront conversations, have that time expectancy and understand the numbers, and then give them a very specific scope of work. Now you can control their time, you can control their cost, and you can control your project getting done in a timely manner. When you don't have those, chaos happens. So lastly, we're kind of getting into of the 4 steps is calculating the cost. And you'll see like a list of 10. And again, when you're doing the house construction from beginning to end, there's about 278 line items. And I know a couple people on here can probably tell you that even more so. But when you're buying a rehab, you're going to take that onion and you're going to peel back the layers as much as the house is needed. And then you're going to go back and start, you know, rebuilding it all through. So that's kind of what this is. Back when I started this stuff was really the school of hard knocks. I didn't have Google. I didn't have YouTube University. We had construction books, and we kind of learned through just, you know, school itself, foundation, and just kind of learning the process, and kind of like what James mentioned earlier about multifamily, you kind of jump in, and sometimes you just learn while you're on the job. And you know, and as bad as that is, it's really good as well, as long as you come out on the positive side on it. But so this particular thing, I'm just going to flow through real quick because it kind of goes into some of the other as well. But preparing the construction site, pouring foundations, rough framing, rough mechanical, the M&Ps. Then you got inspections that come in between these. So you have your rough-in inspections, and that's once all your M&Ps have done all their rough-in installs. And then you'll have your final inspection at the back end of all these. But Meanwhile, to get to the rough ends, that's always the longest time duration. Once you pass all those and you get into drywalling, insulation and drywalling, then the project starts picking up. And that's kind of where you get into these steps 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8, 9. So the drywall, interior fixtures, all of these things you want staged, both in your allocations for the materials and what you're buying. You got to have them there on point. So that way, when you get your crews and they're available and your first crew finishes up, then they are able to kind of get in there to get it started. So if you're doing a house from the beginning, you're going to be doing the foundation. So this is, you're laying out your foundation block. You got your boundaries of your property. You're dropping your corners, and then they're going to come in with backhoes and dig and do all of that, right? Then you're going to get into your footers, foundations, and really depending on what kind of design you have, this might go into like an addition. If you're doing on an existing house, you might have something that's, in this case, you have your footers, you have your side walls, but these are just really good pictures, images to really get some ideas and names and get familiar with what they are. Because again, you don't have to know it, but you know enough to be dangerous. And this is, and no matter if you're doing a brand new construction or just the rehab, you're always going to end up doing some kind of framing. And so the better you are to understand like what goes into framing, what is good framing, what is bad framing, and understand why. And then you'll start talking about load-bearing walls and what is non-load-bearing walls. Just to kind of give you a quick idea on that, your outside walls are load-bearing. The center wall can be load-bearing, but that depends on your roof and whether or not you're doing like stick-built roof, like in this drawing, or if you're doing trusses. If you're doing trusses, then trusses are made to go on the outside walls, and then everything that's kind of in between would be essentially non-structural. So a couple of key things you can look at. So that plays into a cost. So when you're coming in and doing a demo on a single in the center wall, and I want to blow it out to make that wall, open concept, like we hear, you have to find out if it's load bearing or not load bearing. And then because there's a cost, and you can spend, 5,000 plus onto some of these because you have to maybe do some additional footers and do some additional LVL beams and different things depending on what's above it. If it's a single story, 2-story. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay, perfect. So now we're going to get into the M&Ps, and that's kind of what this is. So you have your electrical boxes, you got all your plumbing, you have all your framing, you have HVAC, and then you'll get into your first round of inspections, which is all your rough-in inspections. Once all those pass, you'll start seeing in these outside walls the insulation. So the framing inspection would be next after all the M&P rough inspections, and then your insulation inspection would happen. Once all of those pass, you have now got the green light to go start doing drywall. And that's when you really start seeing the house transform. And then also feels like it slows down drastically because now you start getting into the details, which people love, but then it's a love-hate relationship because it just seems like it's this slow chugging train going on. But then you get into the drywall, you start seeing it taking shape, it's exciting, and then you start seeing doors going in and trim going in. And this is if you selected the right materials and have it on time and you guys are following a sequence. You can get jobs done fast, but for the most time, there's usually some hiccups. There's usually someone that's running 7 days, instead of 4 days, and that's prolonged some things. But then you got the finishes happening, right? So now you got the sexy stuff happening, and this is what everybody likes to see is the polishedness, the cabinetry, all the hardware and the mirrors and all of the design from the very beginning starting to happen and take place. And therefore, now you get the finished product. There's the house. This is what it looked like. This is what it looks like now on the outside. Here's all my rooms, and you start kind of getting into all of those. So it's kind of full circle. So some of the products that I've used to do some managing, and I'm trying to hurry up because I know we're a couple minutes after 8. So
Good, good.
okay. If does anybody got any questions right now before I get into this section? You okay? Well, I'll continue in this. So this is one of the programs I've used in the past. This is actually from a 2006. It was a house flipping spreadsheet.com. And it's nice because the bubbles help you go through this process. And then it starts getting into the scope of work and pre-qualifying forms for the contractors, vendor list, where to go to, contact managers, all your contacts. And then you get into the task manager side of it, where you have your rehab checklist, your punch list, which is at the tail end, your shopping list of what products that you need. And then you get into your project scheduler. And this starts getting into a little bit of the Gantt chart stuff where things piggyback off each other. And then essentially you're closing out the project. So those subs, you're getting lien waivers to, and you're getting the property cleaned up, and you're doing some of the miscellaneous stuff that needs to happen to start listing your property for sale. So this is one you can get. There are a number of other ones. This is kind of a sector that's in that program. You can see down here in the general conditions, you can go in. There's a lot of redundancy in this because when you're rehabbing, you're not going to use all these. And rehabbing, you might use 60 steps, not 278 steps. So you don't need a lot of the redundancy. So that's kind of where I got into, is I kind of took the redundancies out and kind of created my own essentially form and just a simple Excel spreadsheet. And here's miscellaneous, here's cement work, here's some structural, electrical, carpentry. And then I'm putting how many doors, are going in there. How much am I getting the doors for? And then what's the installation cost of those doors? Putting that in there. And then essentially it's all compiling those into my overall budget. And that's in conclusion. So understanding the flow through of your project, the needs, the selections, the labors, the materials is where you greatly increase your profits. So, but I do want to ask you, who are you out meeting to grow? We always hear your network is your net worth. So just to give you a little bit of an idea. So everybody's heard of this brand, Reebok. I got to meet the maker of that brand, Mr. Joe Foster. So again, I'm this little Charlotte guy and been in this bubble for a while, just kind of doing these things. And I've been taking my own medicine here lately and getting out. And so therefore, like groups, like the virtual REI Academy, very thankful for you guys allowing me to be on. And, again, I've met Jan and Sharon through some other ones, but this is a project that was actually in Melbourne, Florida. So if you look at season 7 of the Vanilla Ice project and that gentleman there on the right, what you don't see is I'm also on that side of Vanilla Ice. So I had the pleasure of meeting Vanilla Ice at a real estate conference, and I actually saw this house in person. And so just to go through and do the walkthrough and hear Vanilla Ice in the real estate side of things, and not, and be Rob and not be Vanilla Ice and just talk about music and just doing music. Multi-talented, multi-designs, wealth of knowledge. If you get an opportunity to watch season 7, I recommend it. It's fun. And if you want to get in touch with me, this is where I say I'm glad to meet you. Follow me. Here's all my my socials, and as you can see, I try to make it very simple for everybody on every single platform. So just connect with me. If you got any questions in rehabs, stick around. I can try to answer some of those right now, but you can always connect with me. We can always follow up with some of those afterwards. And as you see, again, my name is Ernest Smith. I do have an E, I do have an I have a GC and an RER. So those are all my credentials for doing real estate. So thanks for your time today. I'll take some questions if you guys have some.
Hey, Ernie, you want to cut, if that's text, you want to cut and paste it and put in the chat?
I
don't know
can.
if you'll do that or not.
I will try.
If not, no big deal,
You're for all the social stuff?
Yeah, I
can-
don't know if that's just text where you can just cut and paste or if it's an
Yeah,
actual picture or
I'll be able
something.
to once I stop sharing.
Okay, all right, cool, whenever you can.
And let's see. But if anybody's got any questions, I need to flip through the chart too, I can. And,
Are there any laws or regulations when somebody advertises property as being duplex or triplex? Like in your case, you went there and you realized that actually legally it wasn't?
Well, again, in North Carolina, we're kind of a buyers beware. And that's in your due diligence side of things. So um can you take it for a grain of salt and say, yeah, hey, I'm buying this as is, I'm gonna do it with sight unseen? I mean, you kind of get what you get. James had mentioned earlier, kind of like people like to embellish and people like to, make this all up because they're trying to get the highest dollar amount they can for the property. So it's up to you to go in and do your due diligence. In this case, I wasn't overly surprised in that. Because the side of that is I knew it was a single family house originally. So, but to like James's point earlier, it was a house that was large enough that they could convert it to a duplex. So I liked it for that side of things. But realistically, on that particular property, I can make more off of it being a 3-bedroom, 2-bath rental than I could have with just doing the duplex. So you got to do your homework for sure. So every state's a little different. I don't know if that answers your question, Emma, for sure, but you just one of those things that you just have to, do your due diligence on.
So it's kind of expected to have like 2 HVAC units if it's a duplex and have everything separate, right?
Ideally, because what you're gonna, well, definitely for the HVAC system, because you want each unit to be able to control their own temperatures in their own areas.
Right.
The electrical, we have stepped into some where they have had shared meters. Then us as a landlord would have to we would have to have the bill, and then we'd have to divvy up the bill between the two tenants. It just puts more work on the landlord or the property management if that's the case. Same thing with the gas or water. So anytime you can get a place that has separate utilities is always better in my book.
Thank you.
Indeed.
Do you have where do you buy your materials? What's the best way to save costs on materials?
Good question. Some of it's going to depend on the volume that you do. If you're going to do kind of a one-off house, it's not really going to benefit you to go to a place like 84 Lumber if you're buying a rehab house and then coming back and you only have to go get maybe a few like 5 or 10 2x10s or some 2x4s. So I mean those you can just pick up at the store. You're not going to spend a lot of money. You're going to spend maybe 100 or a couple $100, so it's not really worth it. And then also those larger wholesalers, the wholesale stores, they want you to do some volume. So like if you're going to go in and do a small subdivision, 12 houses or 50 houses or something like that, then certainly you want to build those relationships with those type of people because you can save potentially thousands of dollars because you're buying in volume. Like for instance, like I do a fair amount of kitchens in a lot of mine. So I have 2 different prime vendors that are cabinet companies. And so by me doing that, I get to save some money. I also can help, local people save some money. When products were hard to get, the type of cabinets that I was able to buy, they're called a RTA, like a ready to assemble. And I was able to get them within 2 or 3 days where everybody was pushed out, 12 to 14 weeks on getting cabinets. Even from Lowe's and Home Depot, that's not off the shelf. So these were a step up in grade, and it has and they looked really good, and I was able to get them fast. So I did a tons of kitchens in that time frame because I could do the speed of implementation on those. People were able to get the kitchens done in 3 or 4 weeks versus having to wait 12 weeks and then have to get countertops and all of that. So it really just depends on what you're trying to go after, Roy.
But how do you find the best wholesaler in a particular city? Like, is it just Google it, or do you have what's the mechanism that you use?
Good question. So yeah, pretty much you start out kind of Googling, wholesale construction companies, wholesale construction, and start kind of going that. Like you could look at like national ones, which would be like 84 lumber. Well, 84 lumber carries lumber. They carry siding materials in some locations. They carry your sheathing. They carry interior doors. They carry some exterior door stuff. But also you can order a lot of things through them also. So they're kind of a national one. So you can always do national and then figure out who's local. What area are you in by chance?
I'm in Virginia, Fairfax area.
Okay. So yeah, I mean you have some of the other larger cities and stuff like that around you. So you'll have some those types of larger wholesaling companies around there. So if you're doing volumes, it's just kind of a matter of reaching out to some of them. If you have some framers, if you're looking for wholesalers, you can just ask them, hey, where do you guys go buy your bulk stuff from, your wholesale products from? They might tell you, you can just ask.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
I got a general question.
Shoot.
First, thanks for the PowerPoint. That was actually pretty eye-opening. For going back to the floor plans and like you showed the pandemonium and the vanilla ice home thingy. I'm just wondering, so from a designer perspective, and then working with, again, I just learned this with all the different contractors and subcontractors that goes into building a home. For I guess it might sound dumb, like who gets the, I don't know if that makes any sense, biggest piece of the pie, I guess. What is it, like the designer, and then like you can't build that type of a home anywhere else unless that designer like approves it, or like does that make sense what I'm trying to ask? Like the design of the house, can it strictly just go to that one person, or it has to be like?
So are you asking this from the position of the trades that do the houses? Like who would be the make the most money off of it? Or are you talking as the person that's paying for it all? Like what's your angle that you're asking?
Yeah, like I guess the designer, like the concept of the house, because obviously they say pandemoniums are new or whatever. Like, is it like the original person that came up with the idea of pandemonium is going to get all proceeds for pandemonium wherever like they're built and stuff like that? Is that how that works, or?
No, you don't have the same copywriting and stuff on it. Now, obviously, if they do have some, like this particular thing here, I mean, really anybody can build this particular one, right? So I would take this to whomever is my designer and say, hey, I need a full working set of plans. They're going to give me, like I showed you before, the other layers. They're going to give me the electrical, the plumbing, the mechanical, the framing, the footers. They're going to give me the roof. Like they're going to give me the whole entire package. So if you go online and you find these designers and you start looking through all their designs and say, hey, I like this one, they'll most likely offer you the opportunity to buy those complete set of plans, working plans. And you're going to spend, I would say for the most part, $3,000 to about, $8,000 or $10,000 on some, depending on layers and levels.
You can get those plans cheap online. You can
Yeah.
get something for like $800, and you can buy a one-time build, or you can buy an unlimited license.
Yeah.
A lot of the onlines will license that. you know, if you're hiring a designer, you're paying the designer to do what you want to have done. It's your design, it's your license, it's your everything. You're paying them as like almost like a subcontractor, like electrician, right? You tell him to wire the house this way,
Mhm.
that's what he's going to do. If you pay him to draw it a certain way, it's yours.
Correct.
Now they do have other rights to it, but I guess the simple answer is you can buy them online unlimited and they can change them too. I've bought in some. I don't think I paid more than $2,000 for whole house plants before.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you can easily go, like if you go to someone that's local, again, they might just say, hey, we're local, we're going to do the designs, we're do all this stuff, and they may charge you more. But so that's kind of where you have to do your due diligence at, even on them, because at the end of the day, you need some working plans in order to build from. But thanks, Dan. That was good input.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, we've got I think just a minute or so, and then we need to wrap up. So do you guys have anything else for me, or we can hand it back over to Jane and Sharon and James, or?
How do, like an investor, when they're looking for a new contractor, what things would they look for when a new contractor that will work well with investors and that, you know, that you can work together in the long haul and they understand the process? What would be,
Especially like a new investor who's kind of brand new and they're looking for their first GC. What's some things that can get them going in the right direction?
For me, kind of like, so what we kind of went through tonight is just kind of having a little bit of an understanding of what the GC goes through or what they do. Because they look at your, if you're talking about a new construction versus the rehab, they're a little different, right? But because most of the time people that are doing the rehab don't really know what the finished product's going to look like because they haven't really figured it out yet. Because they were just like, oh, hey, the GC, you know, we want this open concept. What does that look like? And then they're doing this after they bought the property already, and versus doing their due diligence side. So they've already bought the product, and now they're trying to figure out what to do with the product. And then all of a sudden the GC comes back and says, oh, this open concept that you want to do is going to cost you $12,000. Well, you only had a $60,000 budget. Well, you're not going to spend 1/6 of your budget on open concept. So I mean, so having kind of going through this, having a general idea of the structure, and then when you walk into the house and you're looking at what that possibility is, and then if you got to get a GC to come out with you to kind of walk through, or maybe you got a friend of yours that's a designer that says, hey, yeah, we could do some of this, we could do some of that, but now you got to start putting that picture and breaking that out and then creating that budget for it, and then make sure it works for what you're trying to spend.
that's a good point, because when Jane and I decided we first wanted to get involved in investing, that's the first thing we did was talk to different contractors, the ones that were investor friendly, and asked to walk through some of the rehabs with them and then point things out to us. And, we got that education first to understand what things look like and the costs.
Yes.
That's a great point.
Yeah, because there's going to be plenty of times you're not going to know what it costs. And realistically, for them, they don't want you to know what it costs, because then you're kind of holding their feet to the fire and they don't get to make as much money. And, it's so it's really kind of not in their best interest to tell you all the secrets.
Absolutely. I understand.
Even some of the lingo, we learned that early on. If you can just throw even something stupid like a heavy up, because early on they were trying to tell us, if you put a box in, oh my God, it's like, moving an island off of wherever, and it's going to cost thousands of dollars. And then, once you just say, oh, what are you going to just do a heavy up? Then it got very easy where they were like, oh, okay, they know what they're talking about. Or
yeah. And
I
that's kind
can't
of
charge
where,
them.
that's kind of where I went with this presentation, is to kind of give you a really quick bird's eye view of the process, and really kind of just give you some points of, hey, go out and Google these things and really just kind of have that, that investor language, like we always do. When you're talking with investors, you're talking about numbers, you're talking about all these things up front, and then you talk about all the fluffy stuff in the back. So, and much same thing with the multifamily space, like James does, is, you're going to get to the nitty gritty of what is producing, how much income, all the numbers, and then you're going to deal with all of the other things behind it. So, but in this case, all the other things that are behind it, the pretty stuff, the vanities, the mirrors, the lights, and, the, drywall and all these things have a cost to it. So you can very well go overboard and, in your estimating on rehabs quickly, because when you're peeling that onion back, you're going to create, oh, hey, we found out the house had termites in it. Oof,
Mhm.
like, okay, you just tacked on like another $10,000-$15,000 of work, depending on how bad they are. Because now you have to do the remediation, you have to do the restructuring, take out the bad stuff, put in the new stuff. And, so it pays to go get inspections done. And if you're not getting inspections done, be educated enough to know what you're looking at.
Makes sense. So I know you were talking about, we kind of did that too on our contracts with the, scope of works, where they give us their end date and then we add actually 3 or 4 weeks to it just to give them a cushion. And then if every day they go beyond that, they get charged like $40-$50 or so. Do you think that works better, or giving them a bonus for getting finished early? Which do you think it's like which?
I kind of do both. I mean, again, at the end of the day, you want the project done as fast as possible, because if you are having private money or hard money on the line, it's costing you, right? It costs you per day.
Money.
So yeah, so it's time is money, right? So the faster you get it done, if you get it done and it meets all of the standards, and you're not cutting corners, you're not doing all these things, and it's passing all the inspections, and great. You get done a couple days early. Every day you get done early, you're also getting like a $50 bonus or $100 bonus or whatever that is per day. But subsequently, if you don't get it done with these, then you're also getting dinged, and I'm having that upfront conversation with them, because I don't want them to be surprised at the end when they run long. Then I start, they give me their final bill and then I deduct a couple $1,000s from them. They fully understand why. And it's also in the contract stuff that we do with some of those people.
Gotcha. Thank you for that.
Indeed.
Any other questions? And then we'll call it a night.
I did have one quick question, sorry.
Oh, great.
So
Awesome.
when you're dealing with a contractor, some of these jobs are obviously going to be pretty big, right? So if you've got a GC, you're going to pay 60 grand to, $50 a day is like, okay, whatever, kind of thing. But if somebody's going to do, I don't know, framing for you, whatever it is, for $5,000, then obviously that makes a little bit more difference. Do you adjust the level of the carrot and the stick depending on the size of the actual job?
Sure. Well, I mean, as a GC, my role is I have this whole scope of work, and this is what all goes into it, and I have to get all these people lined up, and I got to herd the cats. I got to get that whole entire thing done. So for me, I'm having those conversations with them, the subcontractors, because I know you guys as clients are going to come to me and be like, hey, we're running a little long here. Like, we got to get going. And so depending on what phase we're in, I got to start stepping on the gas, which means I got to talk to these subs and be like, hey, you're running long, you got to do this. And you're going to have those times where it's going to happen. There's always something. I always joked when I was in the restaurant business, I said, there's always 2 things that happen every single day. 1, Murphy's Law. 2, a Seinfeld episode. Because it seems like, you can have the same conversation with 4 different people throughout the course of the day, and it all relates back to the same topic. It's like, And Murphy's Law is Murphy's Law. I mean, you kind of have to plan for those things. You just try to control it as best you can, so that way it's not slowing up the process. Yeah, so adjusting the stick with the carrot on it, absolutely.
Awesome, great, thank you.
Welcome. Anita popped up. Do you have a question, or are you just popping up to say hi? Fantastic. Still,
Thank you so much, Ernie. That was a wealth of information. We really enjoyed that, and we did take some notes, that's for sure.
I appreciate that, and I have I wasn't quite sure if I was going to be 30 minutes or a little longer, so I'm just trying to compile as much as possible. But if you guys have any questions, please reach out. I'm kind of an open book as much as possible. If you guys have questions as far as, something to do with a subcontractor, or how can I do this? I don't ask for quotes anymore. Like I pretty much say, this is the scope of work. Here's how much it's paying. And this is the time duration I'm looking at. Is this something that you're interested in or not? And then usually they'll be like yes or no, because I've been around this enough that I kind of know what those are. And that's where everybody will eventually get to the more you do it, right? It's the knowledge, the power. But I've wasted so much time going with subs. Hey, give me your quote, give me your quote. Like I did that the other day with one, just because. And they were like, they didn't give me a quote for like a week and a half. And meanwhile, I've already done the project. And they come back, hey, we can get started tomorrow. I'm like, it's already been done. It was done, 12 days ago.
That's
Thanks for the
crazy.
quote. Appreciate you. So,
Craziness.
but thank you all for your time and let me to be on here and share some knowledge with you. And again, if there's anything I can do, just let me know.
I do have a question actually that now thinking about it, you're talking about kind of what you almost call a liquidated damages on the contractor.
Yeah.
Do you usually put together, do you usually use an attorney to put together like the basic one so that you make sure that you have all the right language in there? Because like you said, they can, if you don't have the right language, they come back, well, you did this and this, so that delayed me, because you have to be really, certain that you're not doing anything to delay them. And if you did delay them, it's counted this and this much against that and things like that. So just wondering if you run it by an attorney.
Yes, yes, I mean, in some regards, others, no. I mean, it's, and it really depends on the sub that we're talking to, when they come into the whole phase, timeline. If they're piggybacked off of another subcontractor they're waiting for to get done with stuff before they come in, we'll have some discrepancies in there, but that's usually kind of like what I mentioned in the beginning. If they told me it's 4 days, I might give them 7 days, because they're dealing with some exterior stuff and I'm giving them a couple days for maybe some weather allowance or something like that, right? So, but I know that the other person that's coming in, I might have them start on the 8th day and not the 7th day. And so like I'll usually piggyback that enough to where, I kind of go off the schedule, but I, build it out kind of with a little bit of fluff in it. So on the contract stuff, I mean, it's kind of a per basis. Can you? Yeah. I don't really feel like I have to with a lot of people because that's kind of just straightforward in the way I run it, but I do have them. But thank you for your question. All right, everyone. I think that is a wrap on my end. So I appreciate it again. And Jane and Sharon, thank you. And James, always. And I don't see Nicole tonight, but tell her I said hi.
We will.
We sure will.
Okay.
Okay, everybody. Be respectful of your time. Thank you, everybody, for being on and your great questions. And we'll see you next week. Do you have the topic for next week?
I believe Mr. Work is going to be here, Philip Work, and he's going to be talking about short-term rentals, I believe.
Oh, cool.
Very good. That's
Should be
wealth of knowledge here.
Yeah, it should be a good one. And also don't forget to sign up for the 4-day class in Maryland
In March.
See everybody there, and don't forget to sign up. All right, thanks.
Thank you, everybody. See you next week. Have a great week.